Hola. Gracias, gracias todos. First, I'd like to start with a mild apology. Por hoy, yo hablo en inglés y perdóname, but my slides are going to be in Spanish if that helps at all. So, thank you so much, Romy, for the brief introduction. Hello, everyone. My name is V. As Romy mentioned, I am with the privacy and scaling team working on quadratic funding. We are a part of the Ethereum Foundation. We have quite a few projects within the PSC that work on programmable cryptography. If you'd like to learn more about us, we have a booth outside. Please feel free to come and visit us. So now, before I jump into my talk for today, how many people here have heard about like optimisms, retroactive public good funding, or Gitcoin's grants rounds, or quadratic funding in general? A show of hands. I see hands. Nice, nice. All right. So all of you, great job. Y'all can leave. For the rest of us, the talk. So. A brief introduction. We'll look at a few things generally. First, we talk about what is public goods. We have heard in the past few months a lot of different projects talking about the importance to fund public goods in order to make the ecosystem thrive and be sustainable and equitable for every single person. Then we talk about quadratic funding, which is a different way to think about how to fund these projects that are working on public goods in your community. And then we talk about how it functions. Like, we have all this theory and concept, but how does it work in real life? And we look at why should we care about funding these projects that are working on public goods? Like, what is the benefit to each of us here by funding and focusing on these projects? So jumping right into it, and also, yes, of course, like how can we participate in quadratic funding? So jumping right into it, what are public goods? So we've heard this term come up quite a lot in the past few months, in the past 1 year or so. You have a lot more attention brought into it. There are some main characteristics of public goods. Firstly, you cannot exclude anyone from utilizing a public good. And what does this mean? For example, if I don't like anyone, I cannot exclude their participation or from using public goods. Next, it is non-rivalrous. So what this means is just because I am using a public good doesn't mean there is a lower quantity for someone else. And lastly, just because like one person is using it at one point of time, it doesn't mean that someone else can't use it. So these are a few characteristics of public goods. And of course, some examples, some real world examples are you have street lights, you have roads, you have public libraries. Everyone and anyone can use these places. You cannot exclude anyone from using it. Some online examples, a potential Web 2 example would be, for example, YouTube, where everyone and anyone with an internet connection is able to use it. Of course, a Web 3 example would be the Ethereum blockchain. Again, if you have an internet connection, anyone has access to it. Skylar and Chris talked a lot about how it includes every single person in the world. So that is an example of a potential public good. So what on earth is this thing called quadratic funding in terms of how can the community be more involved in funding such public goods? Before we take a look at this concept, let's take a step back and look at how financing has traditionally been done so far. So right now, if we look at many economies and countries, you know that at the start, every single one of us have one vote to vote for a political party, which then comes into power. And so this forms your government. The government then uses the funds that they get via taxes to decide what they would like to fund. And so in this sense, us as the public, we get the option to participate just one time. And so we hope that whichever political party comes into power would end up diverting money and budget towards causes that we care about. So again, we only have the opportunity once to hopefully influence a decision towards causes we care about. Whereas now, what is quadratic funding? It's a slightly different model where we think about, okay, we have certain organizations or governments or any form of body with power that they will put forth a certain amount of money. So again, for example, if I think the easiest and most well-known example right now would be Optimism's retroactive public goods funding round, where you had, I think, about $30 million worth of matching pool put up for people to vote on how the funds could be distributed. So likewise, and a body, for example, in this context, ETH LATAM would be putting up a matching pool amount. And what happens is that we all over here will then get to vote on how the funds can be distributed to projects that are working on public goods. The focus for this specific round is on projects that are from Central America and the Caribbean. The key idea here is really just that if you look at the traditional financial system, a lot of times power comes from people or organizations that have a lot of money. Whereas if you look at this type of funding, the difference is that us as a community, we get to indicate what we think is important for us and what we feel is important for us. And our vote then reflects directly in terms of how these projects get funding. So, you know, we all matter more than individual wills. So again, the key factors, the key points are that we all get an equal amount of voting power. You can distribute your votes to multiple projects. If you look at a traditional voting system, most voting systems, you can only vote once for one, for example, political party or one project. With quadratic funding, you can vote for quite a lot of projects, maybe even 5 to 8 projects, if these are all causes that you care about. The idea is that you also get an equal distribution of power per vote. It is extremely decentralized. And again, the key idea is bringing the power back to the community, and that every single one of us participating is really important because the power now is in your hands to decide which project you would like to see get funded. So for my Lord of the Rings fans, again, you have all the power in your hands. Now, the key thing, so that was a lot of theory. Now, if we look at how does quadratic funding work in real life. So this is the math behind how quadratic funding works. And this is my face trying to understand how the formula works. I think it would be a lot easier if we went through a real life example of how on earth this works. So again, how does it work? Let's assume that in a quadratic funding round, you have $10,000 to be distributed amongst projects that are working on public goods. So we assume that there are 3 projects that are working on public goods. The first project gets $1,000, and this $1,000 comes from two people that are contributing their own money towards this project. The second project receives the same $1,000, except this is now 5 people deciding that they want to put $200 each towards the second project, Project B. And the last one has 20 contributors. So the key difference, if you see, is the number of voters per project. So every single project ends up assuming every project receives $1,000. It really comes down to the community thinking Project C then ends up receiving the most number of votes. So the distribution of the $10,000 matching pool then goes through this math formula again. Again, every single project receives the same amount from voters. The only difference is the number of people that voted for the project. And so when you look at how much of funding each of the project gets from the $10,000 matching pool, you would see that the first project would end up receiving $740 out of the matching pool. The second project would end up receiving close to $2,000. And again, this is the project which has a few more voters than the first one. And for the very last project, it ends up receiving the most amount of money. And the reason for this is it has the most amount of voters. And so it gets almost 75% of the matching pool amount. Now, okay, what does all of this mean? The key takeaway from that is that it is quadratic funding. Think of it as a form of signal. So it is supposed to reflect what the community wants at that point of time, and it amplifies the voice of the community to say like, okay, this is the cause that we care about the most. So wrapping that up in terms of why quadratic funding, a few reasons. First is what really matters is the number of donations. As seen in the previous example, it really doesn't matter how much of money one person puts towards a project. What really matters is the number of people that end up voting for a project. Next is it is a signal. So for any government or any organization, any body in power, when they see the results of quadratic funding, immediately that's a reflection for them because they understand what the community is looking for, what is important to the community. Likewise, it is a way for the community to participate, to reflect on what they think is important for them right now. And lastly, I think the most important point is every vote matters. Like, it really doesn't matter with quadratic funding how much of money you put forward. What really matters is that you vote. Even if, for example, you end up putting 1 cent or $1, what is more important is that you end up voting instead. And so what is the benefit for all of us here? Why should we even bother participating? I guess the most important reason is that we all have, in one way or another, benefited from public goods. Like, we would all have been to a library, a park. When we are walking back at night, we would have enjoyed the light from a street light. So and some of us would be building on the Ethereum blockchain right now. And as a result, since we all are benefiting in one way or another from public goods, it is important that we participate so that the projects and the causes that we care about end up being able to continue the really good work that they're all doing because they would then receive funding. The key point is that we now have the power. The power is in all of our hands, and it's so important that we all participate in channeling funds towards causes that we care about. A really great example was at ETH Honduras. So The ETH community has been amazing. They have run quite a lot of rounds so far. The latest was done in July of last year. There was $10,000 in the matching pool. I think what is most interesting is that if you look at how the money is distributed, it is not just distributed to communities that are already within the Ethereum ecosystem. You also have funds going towards projects working on climate solutions, projects that are creating free online content for educational content about, what is a blockchain. Things like animal care as well. So again, the entire idea is that projects that are working on public goods, they are all eligible to receive funding. And I guess that begs the most important question of how can we all participate? There are two main ways. First and foremost, we are coming from the privacy and scaling team. That QR code would send you to our Discord page where you can, please feel free to join our Discord. Any questions that come up about quadratic funding or the technologies underlying it, feel free to put your questions down there. Our team is on Discord. We are very happy to interact. Anyone that's interested in running this in their communities, again, we are very, very happy to chat. The second way in which to participate is the team would be running a quadratic funding round for ETH LATAM. The matching pool amount is $30,000. So the organizers would be posting about it on their X Twitter account as well as Discord, Telegram in the upcoming days. Voting will start tomorrow, so keep a lookout for that. I definitely would encourage everyone to participate in this round. And with that, thank you so much. Really appreciate everyone's time. Gracias. If anyone has any questions, I'll be by the side. Feel free to come up and chat with me. Sí.
Bueno, vamos a continuar. Estamos un poquito adelantados, lo cual es positivo porque podemos ir a comer más temprano. No, mentira. Bueno, el siguiente speaker viene de Panamá y su charla es Unusual Public Goods and How to Fund Them, pero va a ser en español, tranqui. Su nombre es Vega IP y él se define como un Community Architect centrado en bienes públicos y está trabajando a nivel local en Panamá DAO y a nivel protocolo en INS y en DEM3. está enfocado en la construcción de bienes públicos que sean resilientes y experimentando sobre cómo hacerlos sostenibles para un mejor ecosistema Web3. INES también es sponsor del evento, así que un fuerte aplauso para el protocolo y para Vega IP. Muchas gracias.
Buenos días. Depende de cómo me conozcan, me llamaré Vega IP o Eduardo. Para ustedes, hoy soy Eduardo. Es un gusto estar aquí. Gracias por tenernos y por tenerme. Empezaremos. Cualquier persona, en cualquier momento, que no entienda alguna palabra de lo que estoy diciendo, puede alzar la mano y yo la contestaré en su momento. Hoy hablaremos sobre bienes públicos. Mis compañeros anteriormente han hablado sobre bienes públicos también. Hoy hablaremos desde el aspecto no técnico de los bienes públicos y por qué son importantes y sobre todo un aspecto práctico que es cómo los financiamos. Básicamente un poco más de lo que ya se ha hablado hoy. ¿Qué son los bienes públicos? Los bienes públicos se pueden entender como cualquier recurso compartido por una comunidad a la cual ese recurso no depende económicamente para ser viable y que no se le puede vetar el acceso a ese recurso. ¿Cuántos de aquí han usado Wikipedia? Alcen la mano. ¿Vale? Bastantes, 80%. ¿Quiénes de aquí han donado a Wikipedia? Ahí está el gran problema. ¿Qué pasa? Los bienes públicos en nuestro mundo usual son mantenidos por el gobierno. El gobierno mantiene nuestros parques, el sistema de agua, el sistema eléctrico. Todo esto es mantenido usualmente por los gobiernos o las comunidades que rodean a este bien público. En el mundo digital no hay un gobierno que mantenga esos bienes públicos. Entonces pasa lo que pasa con Wikipedia, que tiene el mismo homepage hace 15 años, que nadie de nosotros ha donado nunca a Wikipedia. Y si ese es el ejemplo de Wikipedia, hay ese mismo ejemplo para muchos otros bienes públicos que no solamente son Wikipedia. Pasa mucho con el open source, el código abierto. El código abierto es parte de nuestros celulares. Nosotros usamos código abierto todos los días en todos nuestros celulares. ¿Cuántos de nosotros ha donado o ha comprado o ha ayudado a algún ingeniero de software de código abierto? Entonces es un poco la filosofía de cómo nosotros podemos crear bienes públicos que sean sostenibles, sin necesidad de depender de un gobierno o de una entidad centralizada. Un poco de lo que hablábamos de las diferencias de los bienes públicos digitales con los bienes públicos físicos, más allá del aspecto del gobierno, de las entidades centralizadas que lo pueden controlar, es que los bienes públicos digitales tienen la particularidad de que tienen un alcance mucho mayor que lo que tendrá un bien público físico. En ello radica su capacidad para expandirse, en ello radica precisamente el hecho de que todos los usemos de alguna manera u otra. El tema y el gran challenge que presenta, e incluso lo vemos en Web3, en cripto y en blockchain, es que si miramos un poco para atrás, nos damos cuenta que los bienes públicos digitales surgieron muchas veces para cubrir necesidades que la vida real no solucionaba. Hay un ejemplo muy fácil que todos vamos a entender. Hace 20 años alguien dijo, yo no quiero que mi dinero esté en un banco. Alguien dijo, yo no quiero que los bancos decidan qué hacer con mi dinero, yo no quiero pagar fees por mover o por lo que sea, y esa persona decidió crear Bitcoin. Y esa persona decidió publicar el white paper de Bitcoin. ¿Por qué? Porque había una necesidad, que era la necesidad de centralizar el dinero, y había una persona que creyó que esto debía beneficiar a un grupo de personas en general. Y ahí sale Bitcoin. Entonces estos ejemplos de bienes públicos digitales están en nuestro día a día. Estamos todos aquí presentes gracias a eso, porque todos hemos salido de alguna manera u otra como un resultado de Bitcoin.